My mother-in-law locked me in a bathroom while I was in labor at her daughter's wedding. She left me screaming for help for over an hour. But what my husband and his entire family did to her after that left everyone speechless. I'm 29 years old. My name is Rachel. And 6 months ago, I gave birth to my daughter Grace, under circumstances that still give me nightmares. The truth is, I don't even know where to start this story. But I guess I need to tell it because what my mother-in-law did to me that day basically changed me forever. And every time I see my baby sleeping peacefully in her crib, I think about how close we came to losing everything because of a woman who, I don't know, just completely lost her mind. I met Daniel, well, Dan as I call him, about 5 years ago at a super boring work conference, one of those where you wonder why the hell you agreed to go. He worked in marketing and I worked in human resources, and we basically met in the coffee line because we were both trying to survive a 3-hour presentation about, I don't know what thing about process optimization. We got married 2 years later. It was a small wedding, nothing fancy, just family and close friends. His family seemed normal at the time. I mean, his mom Brenda was a bit intense, like one of those mothers who call their kids every day and want to know every detail of their lives. But I thought it was just because Dan was her oldest son, and you know how some moms are about that. Things started getting weird when we announced my pregnancy last year. I was like 3 months along and we were super excited. It was our first baby and it was also going to be the first grandchild of the entire family, both on my side and Dan's. It turns out that right around that time, Dan's sister, Melissa, was planning her wedding to Ryan, who's a really good guy who had known Dan since college. Melissa had asked me to be one of her bridesmaids like 6 months earlier, when we still didn't know about the pregnancy, and I had obviously said yes because we got along super well. But when I found out I was going to be 8 months pregnant on the wedding day, I had to go to Melissa and tell her, look, I don't think I can be a bridesmaid, because I'm going to be huge and probably uncomfortable, and I don't want to ruin your photos or anything like that. I felt terrible about backing out, really, because Melissa had been super excited about me participating. I remember I went to her apartment one Saturday afternoon, nervous because I thought she was going to be upset, and when I told her, she literally jumped off the couch and hugged me and said something like, "Oh my God, Rachel, you're pregnant, that's amazing. I don't care about the bridesmaid thing compared to this." It made me cry. I'm not going to lie, because I had been super stressed thinking I was going to disappoint her. Melissa immediately gave the spot to Taylor, her other sister who's like 24 years old, and everything was arranged without drama. She kept sending me messages all the time asking me how I felt, if I needed anything, if the baby moved a lot, all those things. She basically became one of my best friends during those months, which made what I happened later even more important to me because she proved to be an incredible person when I needed it most. But Brenda, my mother-in-law, started acting super strange from the moment we announced the pregnancy. At first I thought it was my imagination, or maybe hormones making me see things that didn't exist. But Dan noticed it too. She started making weird comments, like when we told her we were going to name the baby Grace. If it was a girl, and yes, we already knew it was a girl by then. She said something like, "Ah, what a common name. I was expecting something more special for my first grandchild." Or when I showed her the first ultrasound, she barely looked at it and changed the subject to Melissa's wedding, as if the baby thing didn't matter. Dan tried to talk to her a couple of times, asked her if something was wrong, if she was upset about something, but she always said no, that everything was perfect, that she was super happy for us. But her actions said otherwise, you know what I mean? Like, she stopped calling Dan every day like she used to, and when we went to family dinners, she basically ignored me and talked to everyone except me. Once we were having dinner at Dan's parents' house and she served food to everyone at the table and literally skipped my plate as if I wasn't there. Dan got up and said something to her in the kitchen. I don't know exactly what, but when they came back, she put food on my plate without saying a word but with a face that, I don't know, was scary. Months passed and I basically avoided being alone with Brenda. If Dan was going to visit her, I would stay home with some excuse, that my back hurt or that I was very sleepy or whatever. He understood, I think, although we never talked directly about his mom giving me bad vibes. It's hard to tell your husband that you don't like his mom, especially when you don't have concrete evidence of anything, just a weird feeling and passive-aggressive comments. The day of Melissa's wedding arrived. It was a Saturday in October, a perfect day with that fall weather that's neither too cold nor too hot. I was 38 weeks pregnant, basically days away from giving birth, but I felt relatively good that morning. Dan asked me like 5 times if I was sure I wanted to go, told me that Melissa would understand if we stayed home, but I insisted on going because I really wanted to be there for her. I put on a navy blue dress that I had bought especially for the occasion, one of those maternity dresses that make you look somewhat presentable even though you're the size of a house, and we headed to the venue, which was like 40 minutes from our house. The ceremony was going to be at 4 in the afternoon, but we arrived around 2 because Melissa had asked me to be there early to see her get dressed and take pictures and those things. Even though I wasn't officially a bridesmaid anymore, the venue was beautiful. It was like an old mansion with huge gardens and an event hall in the back. I remember when we arrived, there were people running from one side to another, the photographer shouting instructions, the wedding planner with a tablet checking lists, all that beautiful chaos that happens before a wedding. Melissa was in a room on the second floor with Taylor and some friends. Everyone laughing and drinking champagne. He obviously couldn't drink because of the pregnancy, but I had orange juice in a fancy glass to feel included. Brenda was there too, helping Melissa with the dress and acting like the perfect mother, all smiles and tears of happiness. She would look at me sideways every now and then but wouldn't speak to me, which honestly seemed fine to me because I didn't feel like dealing with her attitude that day. Around 3:30, I felt like I needed to go to the bathroom, which happened like every 15 minutes in those last weeks of pregnancy because Grace was basically using my bladder as a pillow. I went downstairs because the bathroom upstairs was occupied with all the girls getting ready, and I found a small bathroom at the end of a kind of hidden hallway, one of those service bathrooms that big venues have. I went in, did my thing, and when I was washing my hands, I felt something weird, like an internal click, and suddenly there was liquid running down my legs. I think I froze for a few seconds, looking at the bathroom floor and thinking, no, 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 this can't be happening now. There's literally 30 minutes left before the ceremony starts. My first instinct was to take out my phone and call Dan, but when I looked for it in my purse, I realized I had left it upstairs in the room with Melissa because I had been taking pictures. I was starting to feel the first contractions. They weren't that strong yet, but enough for me to realize this was real, that the baby was coming and coming now. I opened the bathroom door to go out and look for help, and there was Brenda, standing in the hallway, looking at me with an expression I can't describe, like a mixture of surprise and something else, something dark that gave me goosebumps. I told her, "Brenda, my water broke. I need you to find Dan now. Please." She just stood there, not moving, just looking at me. And I thought maybe she was in shock or something. So I took a step toward her and told her louder, "Brenda, the baby's coming. I need to go to the hospital. Please go get Dan." And then she did something I still can't believe when I think about it. She pushed me back into the bathroom. I almost fell because I wasn't expecting it and I was off balance with my belly and everything. And she closed the door and locked it from the outside. I heard the click of the lock, and I stood there in the middle of that small bathroom, not understanding what the fuck had just happened. I started banging on the door and screaming, "Brenda, open the door! What are you doing?" But she yelled from the other side, "I'm not going to let you ruin Melissa's day. You're going to wait there until the ceremony is over." I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't process that this was happening. I yelled at her that I was in labor, that the baby could be in danger, that I needed to go to the hospital now. But she didn't respond. I heard her footsteps walking away down the hallway and I panicked, like real panic, because I realized I was alone, locked in a bathroom, about to give birth, and nobody knew where I was. The contractions started getting stronger. They were coming every 5 or 6 minutes. And I kept banging on the door and screaming for help. But the bathroom was in a back hallway and upstairs was all the music and noise of people getting ready for the ceremony and nobody could hear me. I tried to force the door, push with all my weight, but it wouldn't move. It was one of those old solid wood doors with one of those old locks that are basically impossible to break from the inside. I don't know how much time passed. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. Time became super weird in there. The contractions kept coming, closer and closer together, stronger and stronger, and I was screaming until I basically lost my voice. At some point, I heard music. It was the wedding march, and I realized the ceremony had started, that Brenda had let it start while I was locked in there. I started crying, not just from fear and pain, but because I couldn't believe someone was capable of doing something like this, especially the grandmother of my baby, my husband's mother. I kept screaming with what was left of my voice, banging on the door with my hands until they hurt. But at some point, the contractions got so intense that I couldn't do anything but focus on breathing. I sat on the bathroom floor, leaning against the wall, trying to remember everything we had learned in childbirth preparation classes. But none of that prepares you to be alone, locked up, without medical help, feeling like your baby is going to be born on a dirty bathroom floor. I remember thinking about Grace, that maybe something was wrong, that maybe the umbilical cord was wrapped around her or she wasn't in the right position, all those horrible things they tell you can happen during childbirth. I thought about Dan, imagining how he must be looking for me, worried, not knowing where I was. I thought about my mom, who had died 3 years earlier from cancer, and I wished with all my soul that she was there with me. At some point, I think I started praying, even though I'm not particularly religious. I just kept repeating, please let my baby be okay. Please let someone find me. Please, please, please. The contractions were coming every 2 or 3 minutes. I felt horrible pressure, and at that moment I realized I was going to give birth there, in that bathroom, alone, with no one to help me. I tried to stay conscious, to keep breathing, but the pain was too much, and the heat of the closed bathroom and my own panic were making me feel dizzy. The last thing I remember is thinking, I couldn't pass out, that I had to stay awake for Grace. But my body had other plans and everything went black. I woke up on a stretcher, there were bright lights moving over my head, and someone was telling me, Mrs. Miller, can you hear me? We're taking you to the hospital. Your husband is here with you. I tried to speak, but my throat was destroyed from so much screaming. It came out as a whisper when I asked about my baby. Dan was there, holding my hand, his face full of tears, and he told me Grace was okay, that we were going to the hospital, that everything was going to be fine. Later, I found out what had happened. Dan had been looking for me like crazy during the ceremony. He had interrupted everything to ask if anyone had seen me, and when nobody knew where I was, he basically panicked and started searching all over the venue. Brenda at first told him that maybe I had gone home because I wasn't feeling well, but Dan knew I would never do that without telling him. And Melissa also said something didn't add up because I would never do that to her. It was Dan who found me. He had been opening all the doors in the building, and when he got to that back hallway, he heard something, like a weak moan, and he forced the door until he managed to open it. He found me unconscious on the bathroom floor, still in labor, and the first thing he did was call emergency services. The paramedics arrived in less than 10 minutes. They checked me right there and decided it was better to take me to the hospital immediately rather than try to have me give birth at the venue. In the ambulance, while we were on the way to the hospital, Dan confronted his mother because she had been acting weird all afternoon, avoiding looking at him, disappearing every time he asked about me. And she confessed everything, just like that, told him she had locked me in the bathroom because she didn't want me to ruin Melissa's day, that the baby could wait a few hours, that I was being dramatic and probably exaggerating everything. Dan told me later that he had never felt such fury in his life. He said he had to physically restrain himself from doing something he would regret. Grace was born an hour after we got to the hospital, by emergency C-section because the doctors said she was in fetal distress from all the time I was without medical attention. She weighed 7 pounds, 1 ounce. She was perfect, with dark hair like Dan's and my green eyes. When they put her on my chest for the first time, I could only cry and cry, like I couldn't stop thinking about how close we came to losing her, about everything that could have gone wrong. Dan told his mother that same night, while I was in recovery with Grace, that she was dead to him, that he was never going to forgive her for what she did, that he planned to press charges for attempted homicide or something like that. I don't know exactly the legal terms he used. Melissa, Ryan, Taylor, everyone came to the hospital that night, still, dressed in their wedding outfits, and they stayed with me for hours, taking turns holding Grace and taking pictures with her. Melissa hugged me and told me she was so sorry, that if she had known what her mom was doing, she would have kicked that door down herself. And I believed her because I saw in her face that she was genuinely devastated by all this. Dan's entire family cut contact with Brenda immediately. His dad, whose name is Richard, came to the hospital the next day and apologized to me like 1,000 times, told me he had no words for what his wife had done, that he himself was considering divorce. Everyone supported me, sent me flowers, gifts for Grace, messages telling me they were there for whatever I needed. I spent 3 days in the hospital. The doctors wanted to make sure Grace and I were okay after all the trauma. I was physically exhausted. My throat still hurt terribly from so much screaming. I had bruises on my hands from banging on the door, and emotionally, I was a mess. I kept having nightmares where I would wake up in a panic thinking I was still locked in that bathroom, or where I dreamed that Grace was born there alone and I couldn't do anything to help her. Dan was determined to press charges against his mother. He talked to lawyers and everything. But I was so tired, so exhausted from everything, that I asked him not to do it. I know it sounds weird, that I probably should have wanted to see her in prison after what she did. But honestly, I just wanted to focus on Grace and on recovering. I didn't have energy for a legal process that was going to take months or years. Dan didn't agree, but he respected my decision, although he made it very clear that if Brenda tried to approach us or Grace, he was going to do everything possible to have her arrested. I thought that was the end of everything. That Brenda was going to understand the gravity of what she had done and was going to stay away. But 2 weeks later, like at 1 a.m, she showed up at our house door banging and screaming that she had a right to see her granddaughter. Dan called the police while I stayed in the bedroom with Grace, trembling, because hearing her voice again terrified me. The police arrived and took her away, told her that if she came back they were going to arrest her for trespassing, but she yelled at them that we had stolen her granddaughter from her, that I was a bad mother, that Dan was being manipulated. After that, the messages started. Brenda would send me texts at all hours. Some were like super weird apology attempts where she said she was sorry but that I had to understand she just wanted what was best for the family. And others were straight up disturbing. I still have some of those messages saved. Like she would write things like, "Grace should be with me, not you," or "I'm going to love her more than you ever can," or my absolute favorite, which was, "I hope Dan realizes the mistake he made with you before it's too late." She basically confessed in those texts that she had been jealous of the baby from the beginning, that she felt I was taking her family away from her, that she wanted Dan and me to get divorced so she could raise Grace. Taylor, Dan's younger sister, who's a psychologist, suggested that Brenda needed a psychiatric evaluation because this clearly wasn't normal behavior. She herself arranged everything, talked to professionals, and basically forced her mom to go to several appointments with different doctors. The results said that Brenda didn't have any major psychiatric illness, just generalized anxiety disorder, which honestly surprised all of us because her behavior seemed to indicate something much more serious. The doctors said that what she did was probably a combination of extreme anxiety, control issues, and jealousy toward me and toward the baby, but that she knew what she was doing, that it wasn't a psychotic episode or anything like that, that made everything more complicated. Because it meant Brenda had made the conscious decision to put Grace and me in danger. It wasn't that she was having a mental breakdown or something like that. Dan was even more furious if that was possible, and together with his dad and his sisters, they decided to file for a restraining order. The process was horrible. I had to testify in front of a judge about everything that had happened. They had to present Brenda's texts, the police reports from when she showed up at our house, everything. But in the end, we got the order. Brenda is prohibited from coming within 100 meters of us or Grace until she's 5 years old. And then they're going to reevaluate. Richard, Dan's dad, divorced Brenda 3 months after all this. He told me he had been seeing signs for years that something was wrong with her need to control the family, her way of manipulating situations, but that he never thought she was capable of doing something so extreme. Now he comes to visit us often. He's an action tel VAA, incredible grandfather to Grace, and he's tried to compensate in every way possible for what his ex-wife did. It's been 6 months since the wedding day. Grace is huge and healthy. She's a happy baby who laughs all the time and who just started sitting up by herself. Melissa and Ryan celebrated their 6-month anniversary last week and had a small dinner where we all joked about how their wedding was literally unforgettable for the worst possible reasons. Melissa has pictures of her in her wedding dress, holding Grace at the hospital. She says they're her favorite pictures from the whole day. I'm still in therapy. I work with a psychologist twice a week because I developed symptoms of post-traumatic stress after all this. I have panic attacks every now and then, especially when I'm in public bathrooms or closed spaces, and I still have nightmares, although less frequent than before. Dan is also in therapy, processing everything related to his mother and the guilt he feels, even though, obviously, none of this was his fault. The last time we heard anything about Brenda was like a month ago. Richard told us she moved to another state to live with her sister, who apparently is the only person in the family who still talks to her. I don't know if she'll ever truly understand what she did or if in her mind she still justifies it by saying she was trying to protect Melissa's day or some other absurd excuse. Yesterday, Dan and I were sitting on the living room floor playing with Grace. She was trying to grab her feet and laughing at herself, and he looked at me and said, You know you're the strongest person I know? Right. And I don't feel strong at all. Honestly, I still have days where I don't want to get out of bed, where I hold grace and think about everything that could have gone wrong. But I guess we're here, the three of us, and that's what matters in the end.